So today I will talk about perverse incentives, which is something that is really important to understand if you want to understand like big human systems or any aspect of the world where humans are involved. So Karl Popper says that every organism, every human is in search of a better world. And what does that mean? Well, it means that all your activities are in some way based around making things better for yourself. And that can have a lot of different meanings, but essentially our actions are motivated by what we can gain from a situation. And whenever there's incentives, they usually determine our actions in some way or another. And if the incentives are wrong, then the wrong actions will be rewarded. And the way you can see that outwardly is that people are doing things that like you wonder why they're doing it or why it still exists. So I'm going to talk about a lot of examples and different thoughts about these things in different systems. So first off, you as a living organism, by virtue of being alive today, that means your ancestors prioritized themselves in some way. The ancestors you had that didn't really care about, nourishment for themselves or a safe place to sleep, they didn't get any offspring. And that's why we're the offspring of egotistical creatures, basically. So let's take an example of something that is not a perverse incentive. So you imagine a 100-meter race. So who wins a 100-meter race? Well, it's Usain Bolt, the one who's the fastest, who arrives first at the goal line. That is, if you want to find out who's the fastest on 100 meters, then you're rewarding the right thing. However, if the thing that decided the winner was not the fastest one, but the one who the judges liked the most, for instance, then that would not necessarily mean that the fastest person won. And maybe the race, the contestants, they would do different things to look better, etc., etc. And you will have a system with perverse incentives that would reward something differently than what you actually wanted. So this is the essence of perverse incentives, when you're rewarding the wrong thing. And you can imagine that in any system, there's like the people designing the system, they want a certain outcome. But what they want, it doesn't really matter. Because what you end up rewarding, that is the action that will be propagated, that will continue to go on. So if you say that you want people to do X, but what you're actually measuring or giving rewards for is Y, then you will actually push people to doing Y. And part of this is due to basically ignorance, or the fact that it's much harder sometimes to reward the right thing. And this reminds me of an example. There's a book called Flash Boys, which is written about high-speed trading on the stock market. And it's about a couple of people who, when they realized how fucked this system was, they designed their own stock exchange where they didn't want to incentivize bad behavior. And you can see that they used so much energy. Like they had the top puzzle solvers in the United States all collected in one place to try to preemptively game their own system so they could remove the ability to be gamed out of the system. And this is called the Investors Exchange, and it's a really cool video about it on on YouTube by Brad Katsuyama, which is the lead guy. So that's the other thing, like it's very hard to make a system that rewards the correct thing. But that doesn't mean it's impossible. It just means you need to realize that the reason things are bad right now and that things are not going the way you want, it's because you're maybe rewarding the wrong thing. And this reminds me also of a video game called Left 4 Dead 2. They made the first game, which was a survival zombie game, and then they made a second one. And in the development commentary, yes, you know I'm a nerd because I've watched the development commentary, they talked about different redesigns they did for the second game, because they said that the most effective way to play the game wasn't the most fun way to play the game. And here you see even a game that it doesn't matter at all, it's just for fun. Even then, people still do what's most effective over what's the most fun. So like, even in a completely like irrelevant setting as this, people always go towards incentives rather than anything else. And that's why it's important to understand these things. So another contrast between these things I can give, if we look at the Toyota factory manufacturing cars, they have a system where the cars are on a production line, and whenever there's a fault, when somebody discovers a fault in the cars that are being made, they press a button, alarms go off, everybody stops, and the person who stopped the line, he gets an applause from everyone because he found an error. And before they start it up again, they find the root cause of that error so it doesn't happen again. Well, you can easily imagine in another setting where the person who said, there's something wrong, then the boss says, you're a bad worker because this is wrong, even though it wasn't his fault. Or, we're losing money, now everything's stopped. So you could see how it would be very easy for a system to reward just brushing things under the table, because you would be unpopular by pointing out faults. And that factory would be a factory that produces worse goods because they're not rewarding the right things. And as Toyota discovered, they actually earned more money by just like stopping the production and never having faults in their cars, compared to having the production running at 110% and letting faulty cars get out on the road. So this is interesting. And another example of bad incentives is like if you just look at communist Soviet Union during like Chernobyl era. If you watch this television series about it, it's very interesting because like when something went wrong, when there was bad maintenance, etc., it was when the messages were sent up the line towards the bosses. Anybody who confessed to a mistake, they would be reprimanded. So you can imagine, as you got up the system, there would be less and less truth, because in each step you would gain from like brushing over the errors and pretending they're not there. And like you can see that on certain scales in certain activities, this would have no bad consequences. But when you're running a big nuclear power plant and there's big considerations not taken into account, this can have bad consequences. So that's like laying out the idea. So now we're gonna look about some problems in the world that is partly due to these bad incentives. For instance, if you look at like the economy and the planet and nature, you can see that we're just like destroying the planet for economic gains. So the system, because everybody is doing what they're incentivized to, people try to make money, and because like the the future of the planet is like an abstract thing that you can't make money from it. So every activity that means you can like fuck up the long term but you can gain something now will be prioritized even though we don't want that activity. And you can imagine, this is by no means like a fail-safe plan, but imagine, for instance, that instead of having a currency that was like based on supply and demand and these things, you had the currency itself was connected to the energy that went into producing an object. So imagine like this book. If this book cost like, I don't know, 200 joules to make, it would cost like 2 Joule Dollars or whatever. And then if this scissor cost 400 joules to make, it would cost 2 Joule Dollars or whatever. And then you imagine, if you take a person that is doing whatever is best for themselves and put them in that system, you would automatically have people that, because they want to make money and gain things in the world, they would automatically save energy. And a lot of the problems with the global like emissions and everything is like the price of energy is too low. So you can always, the discrepancy between like the actual value of energy and what you pay for it and the actual value is so big, you can always exploit that to gain an economic advantage. And if you want to read more about this, look up Nate Higgins' energy blindness. So never trust the person, trust the incentives. And in the economic system right now, people are just doing whatever they can do to gain money. And right now, a consequence of that is that we're ruining the planet. And that is because the incentives are wrong. Another thing that is utterly poisoned all the way to the middle is, for instance, the democratic systems that we have in the West. So if you read anything about Karl Popper, you know that he talks a lot about the open society and how do we preserve the freedom that we have in the world right now. And a lot of the problems we have with the democratic system is that the like question they're answering is, who should rule? Who is the one who's going to make the decision? And by some like extrapolation, if you have the right person making the decisions, that would automatically guarantee that good decisions are made and that problems are being solved. However, that is not the case. The system, the incentives are to get elected. And when you're elected, you're not rewarded for solving problems. You're rewarded for looking good, not looking bad. Your opposition is, you want them to look bad. And the worst part is that like we have gotten used to the political system being really, really inefficient. And people say, things take a long time. That's just because the system doesn't reward things being done quickly. Imagine a political system where people were rewarded for solving political problems quickly. Then you would have a problem where everybody trying to do their best, trying to maximize their own gain, they will automatically, as a byproduct, solve all the problems in our society. And I think people, they lose sight of the possibility that this like magical, beautiful world we could have right now with the current money we have right now and the current production, if we just rewarded the right things instead of just rewarding haphazardly whatever like the 1800s people who read Plato thought that the political system should reward. So if you wanted to have a political system that was efficient, you need to change the like baseline incentives to be something else. And if you wonder like, oh, now this guy is in charge, now this other guy is in charge, but it's all the same anyway, well, it's because the system is the same, and the system always rewards the same things. And that's why long-term projects are not invested in, because like, if there's a high-speed railway in 15 years, I can't take credit for that now, so why should I do it? So that's the like a short-sightedness that is a result of these perverse incentives. So like if you look at, for instance, the political system in Norway. So what is the political system doing? It's electing people. And it's been doing that successfully all this time. So like the system is kind of doing what it's supposed to. It's not rewarding fixing anything. So if it doesn't do that, there's no point to be angry, because we never made a system that rewarded fixing things. So let me see what else ideas I wrote down. So another one is like with the school system. The school system is like, on paper they want to reward learning, but in the end they only reward grades. So that means you get people that are good at getting good grades, but they don't necessarily understand anything or learn anything. Whatever short-term tactics like cramming right before a test, memorizing things, all these things that like you forget the day after, all these things are incentivized because you actually reward just like the grades or the test, and not actual understanding and learning. And to this problem I don't really have a good... it's a hard problem to reward the right thing, but yeah, I think if you really cared about wanting people to learn, then it would be more efficient to spend 20 years figuring out how to reward the right things and then change the system instead of continuing as we are doing now. The other thing is with jobs, like when you have a salaried job that goes from a certain point in the day until another point in the day, like 9 to 5. What are you actually rewarding? Well, you're rewarding that people are there for 5 hours or for 8 hours. And that doesn't mean you get efficiency. But instead, if you had a system, it's not like where you just had, these are the tasks you're gonna do this month, then you would incentivize people to be efficient. And maybe they could do the job in 1/4 of the time. Because in that case, they would be free when they were done. And that's the way I did when I did my university studies. I was finished by 11 in the morning, because then I could do whatever the fuck I want. I was not bound. Like, you don't get any medals for sitting 8 hours. That's just inefficient. And the reason I think workplaces reward this is because it's easy, and because they think they somehow guarantee efficiency if they just have the workers there a long time. Of course, the exceptions is like service jobs where somebody needs to be present at all times. The other thing is like with eyesight and opticians. I'm always wary about opticians. I have my eyesight is perfect, or like I never needed glasses. But since the optician is the one testing my eyes and decides, oh, you need glasses, I'm not saying it necessarily so, but I'm always hesitant because their incentives are wrong. If my eyesight is perfect, they sell nothing. If my eyesight is bad, they can sell glasses. And not just one pair, but they can get me hooked on a lifetime supply of glasses. So that's why their incentives are to say that my eyesight is bad. And sometimes you have edge cases where it's not black or white. And that's something you need to be aware of. The same thing is with like psychologists. If you remember the Sopranos TV series, Tony Soprano went to the same psychologist like the whole show, basically, if I remember correctly. And like he just spent a lot of money on psychologist. So you imagine a psychologist doesn't have an incentive to fix your problems because they get money by having customers. So that's this kind of view can sometimes help you understand why something is dysfunctional. If you have a problem in a human interactive system, try to look at what is it actually people are being rewarded for in this system. And if you look at that, maybe you can analyze the root cause of some poisonous behavior. Yeah. And if you have a system that rewards the right thing, then you will automatically have a well-functioning system where all the actors do, quote-unquote, what you want them to. And the last point is about altruism, or people are sometimes selfish, blah, 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 they help people. Yeah, of course. And I'm not, depending on the domain this is applied to, you can get an emotional reward from helping someone. So it's not always about counting the bottom line of money. You can do something that is hard work, but it's really satisfying for you still. For instance, people run marathons by their own free will. So just remember that not all the rewards that people get are easily seen or easily counted. And for instance, when it so just you try to understand what I mean and not just pick the words out of context. Yeah, so I guess that's all I have this time. Have a nice night.